In this video, we're going to be talking about the 6 things I hate about Glocks. Now, before we begin and people start lighting up the comment sections, I just want to disclaim this by stating that Glock is literally one of the most revolutionary handguns that have ever come out there. It's also one of the most copied because it literally set the standard for striker-fired handguns throughout the marketplace. And many of them actually have copied components of, or many of the components of Glocks, simply because they were revolutionary in what they've done. And they literally were groundbreaking at the time that they were first introduced decades ago. Now, even though Glock produced a fantastic handgun and a series of different calibers and different variations, there are still 6 things about Glocks that I absolutely hate. The first thing are, most Glocks, when you buy them now, come out with plastic sights. You're going to notice I don't have plastic sights on my Glocks. The reason why is there have been a number of times over the years when I've been out watching people doing tactical shooting with Glocks, and these have broken. The plastic sights literally break. Now, if these just sit in your drawer and you're not carrying them around or whatever, it might be a moot point. You're probably thinking, I don't care. But the reality is I've seen in tactical situations, these sights literally break. That's why every time I've had to buy Glocks over the years, I've always had to change out the sights to metal and better sights for the Glocks. The second thing that I hate about Glocks have to do with the slide rust issues over the years. And let me give a little bit of background on this. When Glocks first came out up until not too long ago, they included many people consider to be the best finish out there. I have that still on my Glock 20. It's that Tenifer finish that they included on the handgun, and this is kind of like that frying pan finish everybody was used to seeing, etc. This is still, to many Glock aficionados, the best finish that they ever had. However, over time they changed the finish on these slides. It's important to note that unlike major competitors like Smith & Wesson and SIG that use stainless steel slides, Glock still uses carbon steel slides, and that means that they are more susceptible to rusting and corrosion if the finish is not good on these slides. Now, with the Tenifer slides, it was less of an issue. However, when they started changing things over the years, like on this Glock 19, they started changing it, and then you can start seeing, for example, scratches and imperfections and things like that that are starting to show up that I didn't usually used to see on my old Glocks. And then the other thing about this is when people started carrying these in concealed carry mode, like in their 43s and their 48s next to their bodies with these finishes, people started complaining about rust. There was literally rust building up on these slides. And because, again, carbon steel, and you combine that with a poor finish and salty human discharge, and you're going to get corrosion on here. So again, the biggest competitors to Glock now, for the most part, are using stainless steel slides. Glock still uses carbon steel, one of the things I still hate. A third thing has to do with the trigger. Now, a lot of people are going to say, hey, I love the striker-fired trigger system. I don't disagree with you. The striker-fired system is great because it's a compromise. And by the way, all these guns on the table here have been safety checked before I started the video. But the striker-fired system is a compromise between safety and performance. It is strong enough to try to prevent an accidental discharge, but it is also good enough to be able to shoot potentially accurate. It's kind of that compromise where you don't have the best of both worlds, you just kind of have both of them combined. And since Glock never had a manual safety options on here, one of the reasons why I have an issue with the striker fire system because of that is a lot of people over time have messed around with these triggers on Glocks. In other words, they go out and they buy third-party triggers, they put them in here to try to lighten up the trigger pull, or they do it themselves through springs and other things that they do, and thereby making it a potentially dangerous handgun to carry when this becomes really, really easy to pull. And again, without a manual safety option, a lot of people are creating literally dangerous handguns with the striker fire system, again, because there's no other type of manual safety mechanism on a Glock. Again, if you don't mess around with these, that's fine. But the final thing I will say about this is, you also don't want to get into a situation where you're using a handgun and you have to shoot somebody in defense and then go in front of a jury, and you don't want to have a prosecutor asking you, did you mess around with the trigger on your handgun? Because you don't want to make it look like that you have a faulty or an easy handgun to go off, and you don't want to have a jury that doesn't know what they're talking about think that that's a bad thing, right? So in my opinion, if you're carrying a handgun, you should be carrying a stock trigger on the handgun, just by virtue of the fact that you don't want to have to be in a situation where you have to explain that. A third thing I hate about Glocks are the fact that the serialized parts are still all over the place. So if you look at, for example, a Glock, the serialization is on the frame, it's also on the slide, it's also on the barrel. This is very old school. They don't need to do this anymore, especially in the United States. That's why, for example, companies like SIG came along, and then they have what are called trigger units, and these trigger units that fit inside the gun are the only serialized component of the gun. That means that everything else is an accessory. You can pop these out and you can put them into any gun, or you can change different components on the gun. It makes it very versatile. And this is one of the reasons why I love the fact that what SIG did here, and I still can't understand why Glock for so long has not caught on to this. And this is particularly a problem if you live in a state where you've got a lot of gun control laws, or owning one or more handguns and registering them is an issue, is you don't want to have to get a whole bunch of serialized components when the reality is you should only need one, and it should be modular. The other problem with Glocks is the serialized component that really matters is on the frame. And the frame is one of the things that people hate the most about Glock, and they want to change out, which means they literally have to buy a second gun because the serialization is on the frame. So again, that's one issue that I, again, hate about Glocks. Another thing I hate about Glocks are the polymer magazines. Now, a lot of you that have fired Glocks probably think, well, I love polymer magazines, and I agree with you. However, Glock got away with this for a long time because they were using these in mid to large size handguns. And for those who might not be familiar, these magazines are very durable because they're metal magazines surrounded by a polymer shell. And as a result of that, people over the years have said, hey, these are great magazines, they're very, very versatile, and they work. The problem is, when you look at them compared to, for example, metal magazines, it adds additional size to the magazine, which ultimately ends up adding girth to the grip. And where this got exposed was when the trend of people going into concealed carry handguns, when Glock started going downsizing into the 43s and the 48s and the 42s, they started running into a problem because they were still making magazines with these shells around them, but the problem was they couldn't make them double stack. So a lot of people who bought these 48s and 43s and 42s, you know, a lot of them are going to, in some cases, to third-party vendors that create metal magazines so that they can carry more capacity in those handguns, when the reality is the biggest problem is the fact that Glock should have figured out a while ago, especially for their medium to smaller frame handguns, that they need to have a metal frame option to be able to maximize the capacity of the Glocks. Instead, they stuck with this model, which again they got away with a long time ago with the larger frame handguns, but it's working against them now in their smaller handguns. And then the final thing, as I alluded to earlier, is the grip. This is the most glaring problem for a Glock. First off, the grip angle is terrible. One of the things you're going to notice on all my Glocks is I have police wrapping on here, which is what a lot of people do because, again, they're uncomfortable and the grip angle's off. A normal grip angle, which is a natural point to shoot, is around 18 degrees, which you would typically have in something like a 1911. The problem with the Glocks are, with absent any of this wrapping or whatever, the point of aim's too high. So when, for example, you're shooting in low light or no light situations and you're pointing and shooting, most people tend to shoot high because that natural point goes up. And then exacerbating that is this ridiculous hump that Glock has been putting on their handguns forever that doesn't fit naturally within the hand, and again facilitates that poor natural pointing. And what a lot of people end up doing as a result of that is they hate the hump so much and the texturing and the blockiness of this that they literally have been going to third parties and having to rebuild this and cutting out the hump and ultimately getting it to the proper grip angle with a natural feel that ultimately Glock, in my opinion, should have been doing a long time ago. And then another problem that Glock's always had, in my opinion, is a lot of people will undercut the trigger guard here as well. I did the same thing. You'll notice on all of mine, they are undercut on the trigger guard because, again, without the undercutting, it just creates a little bit more uncomfortable and blocky and bulky feel under the trigger guard for the middle finger that quite honestly shouldn't exist. So there's a lot of problems with this, and you know, Glock, in my opinion, really got exposed by this as well recently when the Glock 3 clones started coming out, including this one which I've reviewed, which is the PSA Dagger, which basically is a competitor to the Glock 19. And guess what PSA Dagger did that Glock never did? They took Glocks magazines, these big old bulky magazines, and then they built a grip module or a grip around this that actually feels great. It is much, much better in my opinion than the Glock 19 because it's contoured differently. It's contoured right for the hand and it just feels perfect, has the right point of aim, and it's not something I have to tape up and screw around with because they got it right. And quite honestly, this is just polymer. This isn't rocket science, and this is something that, again, Glock could have done a long time ago in the Glock 19s, but they never did, at least not at the time of filming. And now you got all these third parties out here that are saying, hey, Glock, guess what? We can actually address the biggest problem you have, which is your terrible grips on your Glocks, which we can change on our Glock copies, and that's what companies like PSA did. So those are my 6 biggest gripes, the things that I hate about Glocks. Now, I love Glock. Don't get me wrong. If you watch any of my reviews, again, revolutionary handgun in many, many ways. The only reason why I bring up these items is these are things, in my opinion, that could have made Glock an even better handgun, and quite honestly could have knocked out the competition if they would have been innovative and forthcoming and ultimately address these 6 major issues that I hear from most people and I deal with myself when it comes to Glocks, and ultimately could have made them, again, king of the hill if they stayed ahead of these issues. But instead, they opened the doors to a lot of competitors because these are the 6 problems that I see on Glocks all the time, and they should have been addressed a long time ago. So feel free to weigh in on this. If there's anything that you hate about Glocks or something maybe I missed in the comment section below, add to the conversation. Again, this is not to knock Glocks. I love Glocks. I just wish they were better, and these are the 6 reasons why. If you like this video or you like this channel, please subscribe on YouTube, and thanks for watching.